Hey everybody, Mike Erie, Tim Stafford and Mike Erie. And there is a new podcast on the market that is a direct competitor to the Voxology podcast. And I hesitate
it's a competition.
even naming it. I hesitate even naming the new podcast, but it must be named. I think you texted me that we're in trouble regarding this new podcast.
It's getting a lot of traction, a lot of response.
A lot of response and traction on the Instagrams. Seth Erre has launched his own podcast, and he told me several weeks ago he wants to do a best friends podcast. That's the name of it. And so we do 2-minute clips on Instagram, and we are on to our third episode. And the third episode, Seth Erre deals with heartbreak, in a very hilarious manner. So if you're interested, check out Instagram. They're just so silly. He and I, it's just the greatest thing ever. And of course, it's called the Best Friends Podcast. I mean, of course it is, right? Because what else would you call it with your dad? So it's just so
it's
great.
Gold.
So it's gold. So Seth Erre, check him out. He's the greatest. Hilarious. And if you
do you remember in the third Austin Powers movie when he played, I think it was the third one, I haven't seen it in such a long time, but he played the gold member, and he was like the Swedish, and he was like, it's gold. Every time I see Trump walking around, that's all I can hear in the back of my head is it's gold. So he was just talking about his golden drapes or whatever that he put up the other day, and it's just, I don't know. Even Austin Powers even kind of has a similar haircut.
Oh,
anyhow,
That's fair. That's a deep cut.
Yeah,
freaking Stafford. That's a deep cut. All I know is that Mazzy Stafford got a freaking shout out on the heartbreak episode. That's all I'm gonna say. So,
yeah.
And speaking of heartbreak, evidently we're at war with Iran, and great. That's very Christian of our administration to do. So we're real happy. Yeah, you just can't. There's just no new foreign wars. I mean, even people close to me who voted for this person are beyond their wits' end at just how shamelessly. And again, there are those of us who are like, I think we knew he was just saying these things.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel last night said, "Hey, I hate to Ayatollah so."
Oh, let's go. And so our friend Susie has, she is Iranian and has family there in Tehran. And so there's a whole added dimension to that. We prayed over it in our church services, and just, it's like, there's so many complex things, because on the one hand, her family's thrilled that supreme leader was taken out. On the other hand, now we're evidently just bombing indiscriminately in Tehran. I mean, I don't know that, but it just, from the little clips you get, it's like, oh my goodness. And so this is just another reminder, Tim, because of all of the nonsense going around this, that bad theology really does harm in the world. Really bad theology does really bad harm in the world. There was a senator confronted about why we went to war, and one of the reasons he gave was that we have a biblical responsibility to Israel, which that card has been played over and over and over. Mike Johnson said that they have a misguided religion, and even if you think that's not a real reason to go to war with somebody. Nope. And, it's interesting. I would say Mike Johnson has a misguided religion, but, he might say that of me too. So, and then we've got the end times experts roaming the screens now. Greg Laurie, very famous.
Greg Laurie is all over it.
All over it, man. Iran plays a role in the last days, and so the next event on the prophetic calendar is the rapture, according to him. And again, I don't know how to do this. I would just want to yell for an hour. Tim wants to just yell for an hour, or silently yell for an hour. I'm so fed up and angry and frustrated and disoriented and all the things. And then you have our very Christian Secretary of War just delighting in how like unwoke our war is now. We're not politically correct anymore. We're not shackled by political correctness, which, you know, I thought was compassion or something. I don't know. I just can't even stand it.
Again, to give the etymology of that word woke, because it just pisses me off so much. But the fact that that word originated in the 30s with the blues, with Leadbelly, the blues guitar player, as a way to tell the African American community to stay awake to the dangers at hand, to the people, like to what was going on, and it gets picked back up in the civil rights movement in the 80s, and then again during Black Lives Matter. For them to continually take that, it's just so drenched in irony that we steal this word from a culture that's saying, hey, stay awake to the dangers around you, and then use it in a form of like that, like more woke it's like it's just it feels indicative of the entire American experience to a certain extent. Like
well, then there are these unconfirmed reports that, and they've been picked up by some outlets. Tim and I both saw them, about some American soldiers hearing that this is God's plan and God is sanctioning this or whatever. And again, it's not like I have several very well-known like atheist accounts who are very much concerned with Christian nationalism, who are questioning the validity of that.
Which is smart.
Which is so smart. I mean, they're just really thoughtful folks. But I think the thing that I was surprised by is that I wasn't surprised that if something like that would have been said in the midst of all of this. And we're not saying that it was. But again, it's the picture of this segment of Christian nationalism that is hiding the files, covering up for the president, and now just going to war because he had a feeling that was based on fact, according to our very Christian press secretary. And then when the six names are the six names of the servicemen and women that we've lost are mentioned as front page news, our Secretary of War and press secretary get very angry that they were given such coverage because it makes the president look bad. And so just in honor of making the president look bad, and to honor people who did not sign up for this. Well, maybe they signed up for the military, but they did not sign up for going to war at Israel's bequest. We just wanted to read the names of those people. This was Tim's idea, and Tim, as we all know, is very, very empathetic and a genius when it comes to like, hey, how can we cultivate practices of compassion and empathy? And let's name the victims of the fallen. So
we have Captain Cody A. Cork, who was 35, from Florida. Sergeant First Class Nicole M. Amore, 39, from Minnesota. Sergeant First Class Noah L. Tietjens, 42, from Nebraska. Sergeant Declan J. Cody, 20, from Iowa. Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, 45, from Iowa. And Chief Warrant Officer 3, Robert M. Marzin, was 54, from Sacramento, California.
Yeah.
And 787 people killed altogether, including the 165 schoolgirls. In Iran, 10 civilians killed in Israel, 40 in Lebanon, and so on and so on.
Yeah. But I don't trust our Christian government to tell us the truth about any of this. So so the deeply frustrating bit, of course, is the stain on the name of Jesus, the blasphemy, the idolatry that we keep talking about that results in injustice. And so we had a question at our church service. about are there reasons to hope? And I think there are. I actually really do. Like, and the hope just can't be another political figure, because that's just making the same error on the other side. I mean, although I think that would drastically help and provide real world help to remove the current administration from power. That can't be the ultimate thing that like this whole thing rests on, because if it's just, then it's just the political game and we're all sucked into it. But I think the hope is like the church is just being exposed for what it is. Yeah. And I think Jesus sits behind that, I mean, quite honestly, I think, and people can disagree with this and I don't care, but I think Trump is God's judgment on us, and he's a mirror on us. And if you're leading a church and you're not looking at that's the colossal failure of discipleship that our current church methods and modes and styles have led to, I mean, I don't know what to say. It's this like, I think there is great hope for those who are convinced the way of Jesus is worth following, even if it means you give up power. I think there's great hope, because I think there's renewal coming of the church once all of this dead weight, and I mean that very literally, is cut off. And so it was just an interesting conversation. I've never been more hopeful about the Bible. I've never been hopeful about the church, and I've never been more hopeful to be a Christian, actually, in the midst of all of this. Because it's like it counts now. You know what I mean? Like, this is when it counts. This is when loving your enemy actually counts. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I just have thoughts. I was thinking about
with like we were joking around because my wife is at a conference right now, and so I'm on single parent duty, and my kids have 1,000 activities, sometimes at the same time. And so when I was picking one of my kids up from talent show practice to run them to their sports practice yesterday, I had to have someone else. I was at the same time trying to get someone to pick up my other kid. And and then we were just kind of, texting like a hashtag, it takes a village. And then I started thinking about that in regards to America, though, like that cliche, like it takes a village to raise a child. Yeah. And if America, as this non-personified, unable to make its own decisions entity, America, as a child, it takes a village, and we just keep wanting one person to come in and fix it and change it and make it this beautiful big thing, when it's just like America is all these people. It's not Donald Trump. It's not Joe Biden.
No,
it's not Barack Obama. It's all of us. And so if we want it better, it's all of us. But the church is the exact same thing. We're looking to, whether you're looking to a Greg Laurie or you're looking to a, N.T. Wright or whatever, like you're looking at these people to tell you what to think and how to act. And it's just like, nope, this is the village, and the village needs to come together to take care of its own. So it's just a kind of a bummer to watch. It's a bummer to watch our Secretary of War with his like crusade tattoos, and then have the language and the rhetoric come out of his mouth about this being like a religious crusade. It's like, oh man, you're hearkening to like the darkest corner of the church.
Yeah. And
Not
there's
good.
No. So moving on, but still under the category of bad theology hurts people. I want to read something from the Reverend John Piper, who is, I mean, I respect a lot about the way he has been faithful to his spouse and faithful to his calling and consistent in his thinking. He and I would disagree on almost every other thing besides the beauty of Jesus. But I saw a tweet about a podcast that he put out about lament, and then I found the audio transcript of it, and then I posted it in our Patreon community, and they chewed on it for a week. And I just asked the question, where do we agree and where would we disagree? And such insightful thinking. I don't know, Tim, why it is that people listen to this, and smart people listen to this. I mean, maybe it's just a gateway drug into the Best Friends podcast. I'm not sure.
Well, I think
it's probably Seth.
The truth of that has come out.
Yeah. But this was a very disturbing, and especially because I do a lot of thinking and work in the area of lament, and in pastoral care, and all the things. And so I wanted to take a moment to go through this because I think it does represent harm, very specifically. And obviously, again, he would disagree, and it'd be great to have a conversation about this with him. I don't know if he does that, but he got a question from a woman named Connie, who lives in Reno, Nevada. Pastor John, chronic illness often makes me question God's love to me. In Jeremiah 20:14, the prophet himself cries out, "Cursed be the day on which I was born." Is such raw lament even permissible for the believer, or is this blasphemous? I've felt this same thought bubble up in my mind and heart, but I'm afraid to voice it. It seems greatly dishonoring to the Creator to wish to have never existed. How can I honestly express deep sorrow without doubting his goodness? Does lament deepen faith, or does it risk leading me into unbelief? I long to grieve faithfully, but feel lost in the tension between pain and trust. All right, so we have folks in our community who are living in chronic pain. And this is a very live question for folks struggling with mental illness and so on. His response begins, there is a way to define lament so that it is a sin. And there is a way to define lament so that it is not a sin. So we simply can't endorse lament without defining what we mean. Now, already, you encounter somebody who's heartbroken over the way their life has turned out. Mm-hmm. And your immediate instinct, rather than compassion, is to clarify what is sin and what is not. Now, that's what she's asking, so I understand that that's what she's asking. But there isn't just not one bit of like, hey, I'm really sorry, or I see why you would ask this question, or I understand why you would feel these things. It's just literally like the issue here is sin. And I don't think that's the first issue. So we simply can't endorse lament without defining what we mean. Great. I'm all for defining what we mean by lament. So he makes 5 statements. He says, let me make 5 statements about lament. I've been wanting to do this for a long time because I'm concerned about the whole frequency by which we talk about lament as though we know what we're talking about. Let me make 5 statements to clarify what is sin and what is not in the way that we feel and think about God in the midst of suffering. And then I'll take them one at a time and try to show why they're true. Awesome. Love clarity, love directness. Evidently, something's on fire next to me, and there is, besides Tim Stafford, there are sirens in the background. All right, here we go. Statement number 1. It is never right, it is always sin to feel or think or say critical things about God and his ways. Wow. All right, so he's leading with the big guns. It is never right, it is always sin to feel or think or say critical things about God and his ways. All right. Now, we're obviously going to jump into that one with 2 feet here in a second, but let's get all 5 in view. It may be right to feel or think or express perplexity at God's ways and to seek from him to understand as much as possible, to cry out for it. So it may be right to be perplexed about the way of God. Now, I'm interested in when it's not right, but okay. So he's distinguishing between criticism of God and being perplexed about God and his ways. All right. That's a key distinction for him. It may be right to feel or think or express how painful God's ways are in your life and seek God's help to understand and endure. So to feel or think or express how painful it is, it's not okay to think or feel or express critical thoughts, but to express to God, this really hurts. The sin, and this is statement 4, the sin of having critical feelings or critical thoughts of God is not made worse by the sin of expressing those words to him aloud. I'll come back to that. So if you have the thoughts, expressing them doesn't add to your sin. Very grateful for that. God disapproves of being criticized because it dishonors him, but he forgives those who repent and trust. So those are the 5 theses. Let's go through them one by one. So first one is it's never right and always sin to feel or think or say critical things about God and his ways. The reason it is always wrong and never right to criticize God is that he never does anything wrong. Everything he does is right and good and wise and holy. So he begins to quote just some interesting proof texts here. The rock, his work is perfect, for all of his ways are justice, a God of faithfulness and without iniquity, just and upright is he. I agree with that. All his works are right and his ways are just. From Daniel 4, yes, agreed. All his work is done in faithfulness. Absolutely. Just and true are your ways, O King of the nations. Revelation, yes, the Lord God Almighty, true and just are all your judgments. Revelation 16, God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. It is wrong to criticize God because God never does anything wrong. He never does anything worthy of criticism. To accuse him of wrong is to dishonor him, and dishonoring him is the opposite of righteousness. It is sin. All right, now, there is a whole bunch of assumptions packed into this sucker, right? One of the assumptions that that Piper doesn't explicitly express here, but he expresses all over the place when he talks about suffering, is that literally everything that happens is the will of God.
Yeah.
So the syllogism would be like this. Everything that happens is the will of God. God never does anything wrong. Therefore, everything that happens is a reflection of the God who never does anything wrong. Therefore, it would be folly to criticize that God. Now, one of the immediate points that we would all make in counter to that is that there are parts of life that aren't coming from God, that are coming from either evil people to you, or lamenting choices you've made yourself, or this other team that's on the field that we are exploring. The Bible has a lot to say about that seems to have real agency and ability to harm in the world, right? So we would automatically say, yes, you can acknowledge the ways of God are right and just, and lament that God isn't intervening when the fallen world has caught up to us, when other people are treating us unjustly, or when whatever the powers and the principalities are doing ensnares us. So already I would question one of the central theses of his operation, which is just that God orchestrates.
Throws the whole thing off the rail.
Whole thing off the rails. But I appreciate always his consistency in taking that view to its logical conclusion.
Consistency is key.
Well, it's very rare. Sometimes in some of these views, like you'll see people hold views like this, but then they try to soften them around the edges. And Piper's like, no, this is just what it is. So here's a woman who relates to this text in Jeremiah, cursed is the day that I was born. And Piper's like, well, here, there are ways of lament that are sinning, and that means criticizing God. That's when you're sinning when you lament, or expressing being perplexed or how much it hurts. Like that could possibly be okay.
Think about that scripture too, the weight of that line.
Oh, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. We're
but
so going to get there.
To not enter that with compassion is just...
Totally. It's fascinating that one of the things that Piper seems to ignore is when he says the sin of having critical feelings or critical thoughts of God is not made worse by the sin of expressing those things. God disapproves of being criticized because it dishonors him. But you have all of these biblical examples of people who are going far beyond being perplexed by God's ways, right? So you've got, like, I don't know, Abraham or Moses saying, well, if you did this, God, you'd be going against your own character. And God responding to that. You have the book of Lamentations. One of our really great Patreon folks said, I see the difference between being perplexed by God and criticizing God. And I'm like, for sure, I see that difference too. The issue is there are texts that seem to go far beyond being perplexed. And like Lamentations is full of those. Habakkuk, there are Job, there are legal cases being made against God for his behavior. It is an expression of perplexity, yes, but it seems to be saying, God, you could have done this better. And you should have done this better based upon who you are.
Yeah.
And I don't see how in these 5 statements, Piper can handle those sorts of texts. In fact, he only quotes one verse from the Psalms where it says all his work is done in faithfulness, but it doesn't he doesn't quote any of the, where are you? Why aren't you here? Why have you abandoned me? Darkness is my only friend. Or verses that are like, you have put me into the pit. Now you can say, well, that's just perplexity. Okay, but now the line is so fuzzy. I'm just thinking you're making up that distinction. All right. Not only that, but God seems to value honesty everywhere. Everywhere. Like in Lamentations, he never defends himself or corrects the lamenter. Now, one of the things Piper's going to argue is, well, he does that with Job, right? He does that with Job, and Job repents in dust and ashes. But I would say he's not rebuking Job's arguments. He's not rebuking the act of arguing with God. God is rebuking Job's picture of what God is like. And that's 2 different things, right? Job never once is told, hey, bro, you were in sin to say these things. Not once. I think the error in Job was assuming the kind of God that could make sense to Job's mind. And so when God shows up in the whirlwind, he's like, man, I've heard of you, but now I see you, and holy moly, I just repent in dust and ashes. It wasn't the act of saying those things for 40 chapters that he's repenting of. Because actually the act of saying those things for 40 chapters is what brought God and God's revelation of himself to Job. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. We should actually do an episode or 2 on Job, because it's been coming up a lot again lately.
Can I keep going real quick?
Please do.
Yes, Job is fascinating. So many thoughts. When we cry to God for deliverance, that's very different from telling God he's wrong and made a mistake. Job said some terrible things about God. He said that God was treating him as his enemy, for example. Lamentation says this too. God was not. Job's indictment of God is never excused. See, I disagree with this. On the contrary, at the end, Job repents in dust and ashes for what he said. I had heard of you by the hearing of my ear, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I despise myself and repent. I don't think it's what he said, that the fact that he was being honest with God is that is the reason that he's repenting. He's repenting because what he was believing about God wasn't true. It wasn't that he was being honest. Do you see the difference? Like, that to me is a very important point. In fact, Job was so concerned that his children, while they were living, might curse God. He got up every morning and offered a sacrifice for them, lest they be found to have cursed God. Great. And this is where, man, this is off the reservation right here. When Jeremiah in Jeremiah 20:14 cursed the day on which he was born, he was sinning because of this. God had told him in Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you, and I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. And so Jeremiah 20 chapters later says, God, you seduced me. You led me on. I'm the object of ridicule all day long. And cursed be the day I was born. Piper's judgment is that this is sin. Jeremiah's birth, this is Piper, and the purpose of it was not his or any man's idea. It was God's idea, God's design, God's purpose. To curse God's purpose is sin. Now, here's what I love. The text doesn't say that. This is Piper saying that.
Yeah.
God doesn't rebuke Jeremiah for this. This is where a quote high view of the Bible actually becomes a low view of the Bible, because it just simply has to flatten complexity.
Yep.
Right? There is nothing in here that says Jeremiah sinned by saying that. This is Piper saying he sinned. Now, he realizes there's a little bit of a contradiction here, because he says this doesn't undermine our love for the infallibility of the scriptures, by the way. Scripture is not sinning when it reports sin. I'm grateful to know that you're okay with this. Scripture is not lying when it reports lies. Scripture is not blaspheming when it reports blasphemy. All of that is true. And there are always enough clues in the context so that we know the difference between what's being reported and what's being commended. I disagree entirely here. Jeremiah has these dialogues with God that are ruthless in their honesty, that seem to go, and check it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Read Jeremiah, read Habakkuk, read Lamentations, read Job, and it's far beyond perplexity. Now, there's loads of perplexity, but it seems like bigger than that. So it's never right to think or feel or say things critical about God. My goodness, can you imagine what abusers would do with that statement?
Oh, what they have done with that statement?
Totally. That was one of our Patreon comments, was like, "Oh, I just think it's never right to feel, think, or say critical things about God. God, you've disappointed me. That's sinning. That's sinning. God, you didn't show up. That's sinning." Man, that sounds a lot like the Psalms. I just don't buy it. I think this is such harmful trollop.
Trollop. Love it.
Oh. All right, just a couple more thoughts. Sorry we're taking time on this, but my goodness, if the theme of the pod is theology that harms, this is theology that harms.
I think this ties into the previous thing about our about Iran and this conversation on powers. So I don't think you need to rush it. I think this fits perfectly in the middle of all this.
Look at you go. I love you so much, Tim Stafford. I love you.
It's true, because we're seeing this. We're seeing how the bad theology. Again, just to take things out of ideological, rhetorical things. This is like the hands that are in the dirt of bad theology, and we're seeing it in the way the government postures itself, but also in the way that Piper is talking. So it's
totally
very relevant.
It is never right to feel or think or say critical things about God. Wow. I mean, the hubris, one of our commentators or commenters brought up just the hubris of standing in judgment, over this.
It's gross.
So here are things I do agree with, nor is it wrong to say to God and talk to him about some painful providence in your life. God, this hurts. Please take it away. Isn't that what Paul did in 2 Corinthians 12? It's not a sin to tell God it hurts, to ask him to take it away and then submit to whatever he decides. Jesus knows what pain is. He suffered more deeply than any of us, so he can sympathize with us when we cry to him for deliverance and sustaining grace. Totally agree with that. That's very different from telling God he's wrong and making a mistake. He's not. He's never wrong. And since God knows all your feelings and all your thoughts before you express them, you might as well express them. If you're feeling critical of God, the sin has already been committed in your heart and he sees it and knows it. It may be that when you express it out loud, you will hear how horrible it is to tell the infinitely perfect God that you know better than he does how to run the world. Finally, criticizing God is not the unforgivable sin. Now, he's on to something here, because it's like, and I want to grant the truth of a bit of what he's saying. Like, so I can't sing. I'm not musical at all. I'm not oh, hava nagia, hava nagia, hava nagia. And I would sit watching the first season of American Idol. I only watched one season, and that was enough forever. And I remember thinking that was a terrible audition, and then the judges would love it and praise it. And I kept thinking, either they're all wrong and I'm right, or maybe the man who doesn't know music and can't carry a tune isn't in the best place to judge someone's audition. and so I think there's a concern for God's holiness that is true, that like you can become embittered in suffering, and lament can turn into hard-heartedness and can turn into all of those things. That's absolutely true. But I don't think that's lament then, because, and here's the thing that Piper's bragging about, he knows what lament is. He doesn't. Lament is when you lament is when you lament is when you assume God's character and covenant attributes. Complaint is when you question them. So you cannot lament and sin. The biblical laments all assume that God can do something about this. Why else would you be lamenting?
Right.
Right? If it's just, never once does the Bible say just passively resign yourself to accept whatever happens. It never says that. Never. And the whole ministry of Jesus was in reaction to like the suffering of the world and the crying out of people. So I just think it's absurd to group lament in when lament is already assuming the goodness, love, and sovereignty of God by definition. And so how can God be opposed to one of his finite creatures turning to him and asking and crying out in pain, defiance, disappointment, anger? God can't handle that, really? Really? Man,
God acknowledges how topsy-turvy everything is also out of the gate. Like, it's not like God is just being like, hey guys, suck it up, things are way better than you think they are. Like, God continually acknowledges that
it's evil, that evil is evil.
So what do you do with like the one spot that I'm just infinitely interested in the Garden of Gethsemane, and trying to understand this God as a human being and the way he postures himself and why, and what he does once he's amongst us, whether it's like Lazarus, right? Like just, weeping, there's grief, like riddled throughout that scene, but in the garden, this seems like a big ask. Like, can you take this cup from me? I was listening to Mackie talk about it the other day, and he was talking about like Jesus was having a panic attack. Right. And picking that apart. And I was like, this is just so fascinating to me. Yeah. God experiencing this human moment, and then God pleading with God for, but it sounds like that, like this, take this cup from me, like sweating blood, like this, like intense thing. If that feels a lot like a calling out from somebody that's just like, why, like, out of the get-go, it would seem that Piper's saying that God, this will go back to, having Gambas on and talking about God is not in control, but like placing that God placed that cancer in this person. And since God is in charge of everything, God did that. So you having cancer is holy. So do not quibble with that. Like, do not ask questions about that. God gave you this cancer because of whatever, and they'll make up some asinine, terrible thing.
Well, it's all for his glory. And again, there are some very smart Reformed people out there who nuance this way beyond what Piper's doing. So we're not just saying that the hubris of, we've got it figured out. But this, so Gethsemane is interesting. Gethsemane is an olive. So it's an olive grove, and Gethsemane means olive press, which is an interesting idea of like the weight of this pressing down on Christ. But it's also the Garden of Eden again, because here is the tempter through Judas, and the Romans about to come with some of the Jewish leaders, where Jesus is making the choice that Adam and Eve made. Do I listen to the wisdom of God, or do I go and
leave the garden,
grab for myself wisdom for my own and in my own understanding? I mean, it's the same choice. And so what the gospel writers are always doing is they're just showing the motifs in reverse. So like you have Jesus living the Exodus story at one point. You have Jesus living the king story the king's story. You have Jesus living the crossing the Jordan River story. Jesus is reenacting all of these episodes from the Old Testament so that he is the perfect Israelite and the perfect human. And so to me, that choice is it's feeling the weight of all the times we've chosen to go our own way all at once. You know what I mean? Like the whole carnage of human history that came in the biblical story from our archetypical parents. And so I don't know that he's criticizing there, but he certainly is allowing us insight into the cost of something that he and a father had agreed to, in some weird sort of
and I
mystical
think
way.
that's at the key. Like that's what I'm trying to get at, is that it's like there's an honest wrestling with that weight.
Yes.
Or I was thinking about yesterday with like the imagery of a shepherd, right? Because we get that a lot throughout a lot of the text.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that in regards to Piper or folks like that I don't know how to phrase this, but there can seem to be a lack of imagination and compassion or whatever with folks. And then this juxtaposed against this image of a shepherd in a field outside with your congregation or your whatever, and caring about them and seeing to the end, going after the one, and all this, the imagery, just the imagery of a shepherd. I just picture fields and sitting amongst the animals and peacefully, versus like somebody who raises chickens in a small thing for KFC, right? Like the barbaric conditions of those, like 500 chickens in a box. Like those two images. But to me, that's kind of where a lot of the church leadership lies, is either in keeping people in those little cages because you can profit more from, or however you want to frame that, versus a shepherd out in the field with this livestock that they care so much for, that when one strays, they go find that one.
Exactly.
Those two juxtapositions of leadership I just see on display in this kind of stuff, like just not making room for the human ache. And
one of our
and Jesus seems to really so
make
many
room.
times not just make room, like leans into it.
Yeah.
And the garden in some ways almost seems like a you heard it said, but I say, like it's he's just always leaning in these really interesting way, like the woman caught in the eye, all these different things. There's just incident after incident after incident of breaking not only social norms, but really leaning into the pain of a human being all the way to death.
Yeah.
And it's just so, it just feels so antithetical to this posture of tearing people down for whatever, like not giving people the room to ask hard questions or to just cry out. And I don't know,
in rawness,
really pisses me off.
And I'm wanting to be fair to say, I think there is a legit concern here. There lament, you can move from lament to complaint, where the Israelites would grumble and God stood opposed to their grumbling. The key issue is, what's the difference between biblical lament and the grumbling that God, the stiff-neckedness that God seemed to oppose.
So I think my question is, what is the shepherd's role in that part? Like when the lament turns to grumbling,
right?
In the context of the mystery of this entire story, and
right?
All of that, like what is the shepherd's role in that? And I don't think it's just hitting them over the head with the staff and being like, okay, you crossed the line from, now you're being a little, whatever. And it's how we conduct ourselves in this long form story that we're a part of, that I think is concerning with how we talk about war. I used to tell people that I was a realistic pacifist, because
that's funny.
Some postures of pacifism just do not wrestle with the complexities of a situation. And whereas trying to figure out how to navigate the nuance of, not every war is the same. Not every conflict is the same. How do we persevere to save human life and preserve human life in this? Like, that takes not just complaining about a situation, but how do we learn from this, prevent this in the future? I always tell my students, like, you guys all have computers in your pockets now. Is it important that you know the dates of wars? That's what we were quizzed on growing up. Now you can look up the date of a war in 5 seconds. You can ask Siri. But to know why a war happened and to know what led to it, so that we can learn from that, as a dramatically different, and maybe traumatically different like way of approaching human learning than just memorizing facts.
Yeah. Well, in Piper's logic, this war is the will of God.
Right.
Like, I mean, it has to be, right?
You can't argue with that.
No.
I'm facing something and a similar thing in this here with something that I'm a part of, where a person said it was the will of God to make this big financial decision that's now affecting a ton of people's lives. But when people presented facts for that, oh, this is a bad idea, here's why. Like, well, God told me to do this. And it's like, well, okay.
Yeah.
Now we're not having a conversation anymore. You're just throwing platitudes around, and we can't work with that.
No, not at all. And it robs, I mean, what Piper, and this is where he and I would disagree so much, is Piper doesn't understand what it means to be an image bearer. It means to have real weight and authority in decision-making in the world. Like, he just...
We've been told opposite.
Oh my Lord. So so I've got to read a couple of these comments that we got, because I thought they were so insightful. And he says a couple other things. Like, he's got a really good pastoral word. Like, often he says, maybe one last pastoral word here. Timing really matters in how you teach believers how to lament. You teach them before they suffer, not in that horrible moment of pain and tragedy and loss. That's not a pedagogical moment. That's a moment for hugging and weeping and sympathy and much more. Which, interesting, he didn't respond to Connie the questioner that way. The time to help people suffer well is before they suffer. And if they sin in their suffering, we will wait patiently. And when they have gotten their bearings, again, as the months go by, it may be that we don't even have to say anything, because they will themselves have already begun to regret the things they've said. Can you imagine the hubris involved in judging another suffering to the point where you would say something about how they were sinning, in some of the things they were thinking and feeling in their worst moments? I mean, that's really insane. That's just crazy.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I wonder what sitting Shiva would look like in his framework.
Yeah, I don't know. So this is one of our commenters. While I deeply appreciate the concern to protect God's holiness, this feels more rigid than the biblical text itself. And I totally agree with that. Scripture preserves Jeremiah's and Job's raw protests without explicitly labeling them as sin, and the Psalms regularly voice covenantal complaint that sounds far stronger than mere perplexity. This 100%. It seems this framework reflects a distinctly American evangelical instinct to safeguard divine sovereignty through tight moral categories rather than allowing the fuller tension of biblical lament. Jacob wrestled, Habakkuk questioned, Jeremiah accused, David protested. Jesus cried, "Why have you forsaken me?" I suppose Dr. Piper would need to explain how these examples fit within such a strict line between lament and critical speech. I thought that was a phenomenal point. Someone else said, can't we be both devastated and faithful at the same time? Yes. Blessed are those who mourn, who they will be comforted. Like, there just doesn't seem to be that.
It's the complicated nature of being human.
Another person said his response to Connie's question is not with empathy and compassion. He tells, or teaching her how to lament faithfully. Instead, the bulk of the answer is about the danger of sin, it's just that whole approach, the entire approach of that worldview is dealing with sin and just avoiding sin. That is the entire goal. Arbitrating sin, defining what sin is, keeping away from sin, rebuking sin, confessing sin, right? Minimizing sin. It's just absolutely crazy. All right. And then here was just one last thing. Lament, she writes, by definition cannot be sin. Now, this is where I'm at. If it's lament, it's not sin. Lament is a biblical category of worship. It's not. This is where Piper doesn't know what he's talking about, quite honestly. Lament is within the covenantal context, coming before God and crying out, whatever it is you're crying out, but it's a turn to God. Like it's a turn to God with a complaint. Like that's built into the definition of lament. And the laments were read by Israel corporately. Like some today still read the book of Lamentations on one. It's in August usually, where Israel laments the suffering of their people throughout history. And they just read the entire book. They chant through the entire book of Lamentations. Like these were worship texts. You know what I mean? And to say, well, I mean, they were possibly sinning. No! Lament is turning toward God in the depths of our pain and sorrow. Lament affirms that we can trust in the character of God. Why else would we wonder why a God whose essence is love would allow us to experience such hardship? Lament affirms that God is a God of compassion and tenderness who will meet us and join us in our pain, and not a God of wrath and capriciousness who will get angry if we question him. Lament trusts that God will meet with us in our pain and weep together with us, like Mary and Martha, who ran to Jesus in their grief and did complain, Jesus, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. That's not, maybe perplexity, but it sounds a little more than that. Our laments expect Jesus to weep with us. Lament affirms our dignity and our belovedness. We would not trust God with our brokenness, our disappointment, and our anger if we don't trust that what God wants for us is shalom and wholeness. When someone is lamenting, they are making a choice for relationship, not against it. Oh,
that came up in when I was doing putting notes together for that worship panel conversation. One of my notes just read something to the effect of like, worship is shalom building. It's part of what it is, and that's why justice is so tied into that. But I think I was thinking about this yesterday with I told you in therapy, I kind of went on a rant about the powers and how it just bothers me that this is so riddled throughout the text, all the way through. If you want to start with all the way back to like we did this and whatever, right? So there's just this idea of other entities from the beginning forward. And how helpful that is in the conversation, like this conversation and the conversation about the problem of evil and all those kind of things. And then I was thinking about the Joker and Dark Knight and how that is such a great, it's probably my favorite depiction of a villain because he doesn't want anything. And so Batman cannot figure out how to stop him because he's not trying to gain wealth or power. He's just seeding chaos into the world and he can't fight it. And even when he tries to physically fight him, he's like, you're so strong, you can hit me as much as you want. Like, it's not doing anything. Yeah. And so I just think it's such a wonderful depiction of how some of this stuff works with just seeding chaos. And when you're lamenting about chaos that may or may have been a human path or whatever that led to something like, or whether it is this influence of chaos. It's just like what does Alfred say to Bruce in that movie? Like, some people just want to watch the world burn. And there is something to that idea. Like there's these things that seed chaos that just want to watch it burn. And you can't, you can't logically fight it. And so sometimes lament, like when we're in the middle of this chaos and we're looking up and out, I started praying for someone recently, and I have not been praying for years. So this was a step for me. But trying to reconcile the conversations we've had about prayer, where my agency is involved in it and where it isn't, how much of it is acknowledging something to God or figuring out my part or place in it. And I was praying for somebody who's really just been going through a lot and they've torn their faith completely out. And it was hard for me in our last conversation last week about heaven being right here next to our face, this realm. I was telling my therapist last night that N.T. Wright didn't say this, but he kind of somebody asked him a question about like what happens when we die, like if there isn't a heaven and a hell and there's not a purgatory or whatever, in the kind of the ways we understood them, what happens to the person in between now and when new creation fully arrives, you know, question that we've all asked a million times. And he didn't say this, but he kind of insinuated that it has something to do with that realm, that we're there maybe until something shifts or whatever. But again, he didn't say that implicitly or explicitly, but it provoked a lot of thoughts in my head about, as I'm praying for this person, and if there is an agent of chaos that is involved here, then I'm asking that that agent of chaos be taken away, be taken off, be pushed aside. And I'm trying to pray it not incantationally. I'm trying not to try to find the right words and to manipulate God in this conversation, which, as we said before, that's how I prayed growing up. I wanted my prayers to be heard, so I tried so hard to pray them correctly. And now I'm just like, I'm trying to pray as honestly as I can and honestly acknowledge what place I can play in this. But then if there are these things like that, then, and that's the little, and this can be your segue, but this is the little poem that I had. It's only one line, but it's also Emily Dickinson. But I was thinking about this in regards to prayer and in regards to how we posture ourselves in hope, in this hope, the way that Brueggemann and the way we've been talking about it. So the poem is called Not Knowing When the Dawn Will Come. She says, not knowing when the dawn will come, I open every door, or has it feathers like a bird or billows like a shore. And I just like that idea of like not knowing. It reminded me of the now he is risen indeed thing, like not knowing when the dawn is coming, I'll open every door and I will go. I'm going to actively participate in seeking it because I know it's coming, but I don't know when or how it's coming. Ooh, and so instead of posturing in a way that's like in full certainty and condemnation of people crying out, and all this stuff, like leaning into that hope and understanding that the dawn is coming. And then to tie it to Batman too, because I didn't even think of that, but the day is always darkest before the dawn, or whatever. Like the night is always darkest before the dawn, and I don't know. So there's a lot in there about like how we play against this chaos. But part of it is acknowledging it. And not just
and I think that's the part Piper can't handle in his theology is, I mean, I know what he will say is, God is sovereign over the powers. Look, Job had to ask permission before he, Satan had to ask permission before he went after Job, excuse me. And so he's going to say, hey, like Satan is only operating under the permission of God. And in one sense, that's true. I mean, if we're right about this thing, then God could just obliterate Satan like in a second, and just take him out from the chessboard. But evidently there's this slow movement of human history into the fullness of the kingdom, of which this tester has some small bit of authority over some realm and rule. And I don't understand the reason. I don't at all. I don't at all.
And don't even really pretend to understand. Anybody that says that they do.
Well, there's a book I'm reading called Slow Theology by our friends AJ Swoboda and Nijay Gupta. And one of the arguments they make is that theology has to be slow. It can't be quick. It can't be quick. It can't be sound bited. It can't be memed. Like it's a slow formation of trust and reevaluation, and then trust and then reevaluation. And I mean, it's a really great point. But they also talk about how the way that humans are best formed is over time. And so perhaps God understands that image bearing takes time to learn and grow into. But it was just an interesting, like, why doesn't God just take us to heaven? Quote unquote, or new creation the minute we say yes to Jesus. Like why
Well,
why
and then as soon as
here?
when we were in the Genesis series, and you have to correct me because I'm trying to pull this from the back of my head, but about like that we were not created as infinite beings, that tree was there, and
Mm-hmm.
that we in essence refused that, or whatever,
Mm-hmm,
however
mm-hmm,
I don't know how you
mm-hmm.
would phrase that, but that even just that little thing reframed a
Yeah,
lot of the way that I think about humanity and our existence and our story and that kind of stuff. Because even there's some agency and complexity to whatever God's trying to do that simplistic theology ignores
just doesn't
completely.
capture totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, to be an image bearer is to actually have power. I mean, when God says to the Adam, name the animals, like that's an expression of God delegating power. And like we talked about, God delegates power to these spiritual beings to govern, right? In Genesis 1. And I just don't see enough weight given to that. So when we're in the middle of the powers and we're hearing somebody say it's always wrong to think, act, or feel anything critical of God, it's just kind of like, well, that really seems to minimize the I mean, if you take all of the language, the power, demon, principality language, and just cobble it together, it dominates. It's a dominant concern of the New Testament, particularly as it works itself out in the midst of church communities.
Oh man,
um
I was watching Henry Rollins. He was getting interviewed. I'm so sorry, but it all ties together.
Tim Stafford is on a bender today.
Henry Rollins. So if you don't know Henry Rollins,
Black
I forgive
Flag.
you. Black Flag, like punk pioneer. But in his latter half of his career, he's been like a spoken word. I've seen him do spoken word multiple times, and he's such just a really intelligent, knowledgeable human being. But he was being interviewed by Pharrell Williams about something, and just a little clip of him talking about the importance of education, the difference it made in his life, but the difference it's made in a bunch of different cultures in America, and how us leading in education being a priority, is what built the middle class and made us the global, how we affected the global economy post World War II, etc. Like all this stuff. And we were talking about it in my classroom about Oppenheimer. And did you watch the movie? This will tie
I
in,
did.
I
I've
swear.
just your cultural reference this episode is amazing. I just want to type it out. I want to type out everything referenced. Yes.
Oppenheimer was a film that came out, I don't know, 2 years ago.
I did see it, and it was magnificent.
It was great, but man, some of the questions it provoked about humanity, exactly.
Yes.
That was, I think, fascinating. So human discovery, like science, the innocence and learning about the atom and what they could do and all this stuff, like, and we were talking about it and likening it to AI, and just like we can't help but advance and learn and grow. It's like innate in our human core, and I think it's a wonderful thing, but sometimes that stuff gets perverted for like bad purposes. And obviously with what happened with Oppenheimer, you really watch, at least in the film, his character really wrestle with understanding the magnitude of what was about to happen from the discoveries and the science and the pursuit of knowledge that he had. And there's a conversation in there about how when they set off the first bomb, there's like a 3% chance that it could ignite the atmosphere and kill everybody on the planet. And I'm sitting in the theater going like, I thought about that for days afterwards. Just that one line I thought about for days afterwards. Like, the power that humans have is really, really massive. And I was telling my students, like, any one of you could take another one of your lives, and just one life, and that is an immense amount of power. You can end someone's story today. The fact that we have enough weaponry to destroy the entire planet that God created, like, we have the power to do immeasurable things. There's enough nuclear weapons on the planet to destroy the planet 2 or 3 times over, I read somewhere. Or the fact that you could ignite the atmosphere and kill everybody just in the and so I was thinking about that in regards to the agency conversation, the agency in the garden, the agency that's given to us, and then what we do with it, and then how we wrestle through the ramifications of decisions we've made, and then how chaos provokes some of that stuff. Like how, like when the angels talk about, you know, these things that are existing over nations and causing war, it's just that we have so much agency in there and so much power in there, but if we don't have the education and we don't have the curiosity and the critical thinking skills, then we cannot, we're so susceptible to those powers and to that chaos.
Okay. Yes. Bring it back to Rollins.
He was arguing that
I was waiting for that closed loop. I was waiting for the closed loop.
Where we are now in a lot of ways is because that we have disvalued education, and because we've disvalued education, we've disvalued knowledge, critical thinking, empathy. Empathy is such a huge part of education. And so that's why I started there, is that all of that loops through when we have just people like Piper that want to put the chickens in the cages and keep them kind of docile in there until you can turn them into fried chicken, rather than a shepherd who's trying to usher a flock through an open field. You have, if you don't have the education or the agency to parse that out, then you're going to be in the cage and you're going to end up in a bucket.
Oh, I don't know what I might have just killed happened. The podcast. Oh, I think, Best Friends podcast now, I think there's a clear choice for co-host.
All that to say is that whole long thing is just like, what does our agency look like within this thing with the powers? That's what all of that was about. Oppenheimer, Henry Rollins, Emily Dickinson, Batman.
The Dark Knight. Yes. Oh, my Lord. Okay. Well, if someone were going to draw a Venn diagram of the content of this thing, that would be amazing. Well, friends, we're over an hour already. So speaking of an agent of chaos, I think Tim Stafford is beautifully captured. We love you guys so much. Thank you truly for the privilege of being a part of your life. And if the world is still here, we'll see you next episode.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. The Voxology podcast is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is made possible by listeners just like you. If you'd like to partner with us, you can do so at patreon.com/Voxology podcast or on Tithely, tithe.ly, and just search Voxology podcast. Links for both are in the show notes and on our website. You can interact with the hosts on Facebook /Voxology Podcast or on Instagram at Voxology Podcast, and on Twitter or X, whatever it is, at Mike Erie. Thank you for walking this long road with us.